The apartment had been vacant for 2 years. The door was locked. The notice said no entry. And yet every single night at exactly 9 minutes past 9, the lights inside switched on. Nobody had a key. Nobody had an explanation. And nobody, not the landlord, not the tenants, not the police, had ever once gone inside after dark to find out why. Everyone in the building knew about apartment 4B. It sat at the far end of the 4th floor hallway, separated from the other units by a stretch of corridor that always smelled faintly of something damp, something old. The landlord, a heavy-set man named Gerald, who rarely made eye contact, had stopped renting it out 2 years prior. He gave no explanation. When tenants asked, he simply said the unit needed work. But the walls were freshly painted. The carpet had been replaced. The door had a new lock. There was nothing wrong with that apartment. Nothing that could be measured. Nothing that could be filed away in a report. Except for one thing that nobody could explain, and everybody had noticed. Every night, without fail, at exactly 9:09, the lights inside apartment 4B switched on. Daniel Marsh moved into 4A on a Thursday in October. He was 31, recently divorced, and carrying the kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. He was looking for the kind of quiet that only a half-empty building could offer. On his first night, unpacking boxes in his kitchen, moving on autopilot the way grief makes you do, he noticed a faint amber glow bleeding under the shared wall from the unit beside his. He assumed someone had moved in. He thought nothing of it. It was only when he stepped into the hallway and saw the door of 4B sealed shut, deadbolted, with a small printed notice reading, "Vacant, no entry," that the first thread of unease began to pull at something deep inside his chest. He asked Gerald about it the following morning. The landlord stirred his coffee without looking up and said it was probably faulty wiring. A timer. Something left behind. Daniel nodded and let it go, the way tired people let things go when they don't yet have the energy to be afraid. But that night he sat on his couch and watched the clock. At 9:09 exactly, the strip of light appeared beneath his wall again, soft, warm, and completely steady. Not a flicker, not a pulse. It was the light of a room someone had just walked into and switched on. His mouth went dry. He pressed his ear against the shared wall and listened. Somewhere on the other side, beneath the silence, he heard the slow, deliberate sound of a chair being dragged across a floor. He told himself it was the building settling. He believed this for exactly 4 days. A fragile belief, the kind you hold together with both hands. On the 5th night, he heard something no rational thought could absorb. Not a creak, not ambient noise. It was breathing. Low, rhythmic, unhurried. So close that whatever was making that sound would have been standing less than 2 feet from where he sat. He pulled back from the wall and knocked his shoulder against the coffee table. He spent the rest of the night in the center of the room with every light blazing, his knees drawn up, his heart hammering until morning finally came. He went to Gerald again. This time he demanded answers. Something in his voice, raw, sleepless, done pretending, finally cracked the man's composure. Gerald looked at him for a long moment and said, very quietly, that the last tenant had not moved out. She had simply stopped being seen. The police had checked the unit. No luggage, no sign of struggle. The woman, her name was Petra, she had lived there 11 months, had vanished so completely that the department eventually closed the file. Gerald had repainted, recarpeted, installed a new lock, and tried to forget. But the lights had started the very night she disappeared. He had never once gone back inside after dark. Daniel stood in the hallway and felt the ground shift beneath him. He looked at the door of 4B. The deadbolt was in place. He reached out and pressed 2 fingers against the wood, and what he felt stopped his breath entirely. The door was warm. Not the warmth of a heated corridor, the specific, intimate warmth of something that had been leaning against it from the inside. He looked at Gerald. The landlord was already moving toward the stairwell, shoulders drawn in, footsteps too fast. He did not look back, and Daniel was left alone in that corridor with the warm door and silence pressing in from every direction. He packed a bag that night. He had every intention of leaving. He carried the bag to his door, opened it, and stopped. Apartment 4B was open. The deadbolt drawn back, the door 3 inches ajar, the light on. Through the gap he could see a small table, a glass of water still rippling as though someone had just set it down. He should have walked. Every nerve told him to walk. But on the table, beside the glass, was a photograph. A photograph of his apartment taken from inside that room through the shared wall, as though the wall had never existed. He pushed the door open. The room was clean, empty, undisturbed. He picked up the photograph. On the back, written in small, careful letters, "She watched you for 5 days before she decided you were safe. She has been watching me for 2 years." Below that, in a different hand, shakier, desperate, his name. Then one final line. "Don't turn off the light. If the light goes off, it means she's done watching." Daniel looked up. Across the empty room, the switch on the wall began to move downward on its own. The light went out.